So today I'm really delighted to talk to Camille Vasquez. She's a partner at Brown Rudnick and is very well known for her key role in the case of the Johnny Depp trial. So Camille, it's a great pleasure to have you here to get to know you better and also your negotiation insights. So it's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.
So to set the scene, I would like to start off with your background. Would you like to give me some insights and your steps to your current position?
Absolutely. I went to school in California. I'm a California girl through and through, born and raised there. I started my education at the University of Southern California. And then after that, after graduating, I attended law school in Southwestern, also in Los Angeles, California. And I started my practice right after law school. I worked for what's well known as an insurance defense firm. So it's where I learned how to take my first deposition. I did my first trial while working there, and then eventually moved up into big law and landed at Brown Rudnick, where I met my client that everyone has heard about, Johnny Depp, and I had the privilege of working with him for 5 years before we ended up filing and taking the Depp v. Heard case to trial.
You just mentioned Johnny Depp, right? So from our perspective at the Schranner Negotiation Institute, the preparation is like a huge thing before a negotiation. And could you give me some insight about how do you prepare for such a difficult and tough negotiation beforehand?
I think, and I stress this a lot, I think you have to be over-prepared. You have to be the most prepared person in the room. And the way you do that is by knowing your position, knowing the evidence better than your opponents do. And I don't think there's any substitute to hard work. I don't think you can be fed the information. I think you have to take it in yourself. And so for me, I had studied the evidence in a way that I don't believe a lot of people had. I knew that evidence. I remembered things that Ms. Heard had said in different versions of witness statements, for example, in the UK trial that Mr. Depp brought against the Sun newspaper. I learned the position very, very well because I knew that eventually I would be challenged on the evidence, or I would be challenged during a tough moment in cross-examination or negotiations with the other side. And the way that I build confidence is by being the most prepared person across that table.
Right, and the preparation is also about the right mindset. So are there any specific strategies and tactics you use on how to prepare yourself from the mindset perspective?
Yes, I think that, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, was having the goal in mind. And the only goal that was available, the only solution to this was we needed to win, and we needed to win definitively, and we needed to win unanimously. We needed to convince 7 people on that jury to go our way. And when you're goal-oriented, I think it helps you in the negotiations that there are no other solutions to the problem. You have to you need to get to that finish line. And so I think knowing that we had only one possible outcome that was acceptable to our client really helped us focus on what we needed to do to achieve that outcome.
Mm-hmm. And especially in negotiation, it's all about managing risks. So, and in our consulting department, we focus intensively on managing internal and external risk before going into the negotiation. So what was the biggest internal risk from your perspective?
I think that one of the most unpredictable parts of this was how was the evidence going to come in? Mm-hmm. We knew what we needed to put in to the trial, what we needed to present to the jury, but how we did that was incredibly important and strategic. And the reason I say that is because even though Mr. Depp was the one bringing the case, these allegations were being made against him. And so he was in a position where he had to defend himself.
Right.
And so it put us in a unique position because we couldn't address those allegations until Ms. Heard, which, because she was the defendant in the case, went second, went after Mr. Depp. So what we did is we employed the strategy of telling his story without really addressing the allegations until they were made, which was they were made in her case in chief. And I think storytelling is a big part of any negotiation or trial. It's how do you tell your story in an advocacy-forward way to convince the other side or to convince the jury or to convince the judge that your side is the right side, your story is the right one. And you do that by, again, focusing on what the ultimate outcome is, and you frame everything around that narrative. It's how do you tell that in a really convincing, advocacy-forward way.
And we just talked about those internal risks and reframing the story. What about the external risk? Because from my perspective, social media was a huge external risk, right? How did you handle such a public pressure? Did you had a master plan?
No, we really didn't. I mean, obviously we had crisis managers involved, we had PR professionals involved that were, what I would say about the external pressures is you can't do everything. You can only control what you're in charge of. And what we were in charge of was being zealous advocates for our clients and doing the legal work. Of course, we collaborated with crisis managers, we collaborated with PR professionals, but that was their role. They were the ones that had to manage the external narratives, the external risks. And the way you do that, I think, is by educating them. So we worked closely with certain friendly reporters that were going to be writing about the case in a way that we would educate them. It wasn't to convince them, because we wanted them to write fair pieces about what was actually happening during that trial. But it was about educating them of this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is the reason that we're asking for transparency. This is the reason that we don't have a problem with the applications that's been made by different news organizations to have cameras. It was about the theme of transparency from the beginning. But you have to explain that to the external people that are observing and then contributing to the way the public reacts to the evidence or what's actually happening during the crisis or the negotiation. So I think it's about sitting in your lane and doing what you can do and being a master at that, which is what we were focused on, what was happening in those four walls in that courtroom, and then making sure that the external experts had what they needed to manage those risks.
It's a really great insight to get your internal perspective of this case. So I can imagine it's also a really emotional topic, right? So also on your part, how did you manage to balance your emotional triggers and those strict process requirements?
I think it's okay to lean into your emotion. I think as long as it doesn't go overboard and you let your emotions take over. But I think it's at least very authentic to me to be emotionally invested in my clients' problems and in what we're facing together. I think it makes me a better advocate, and it's authentic and genuine to who I am as an individual. So I felt very strongly for my client and my friend, and I wanted, on a very personal level, to help him, to clear his name of these allegations that I did not believe. And that made me, I truly do believe it made me a better advocate for him and for the rest of my clients that I get to represent. So I don't have a problem with leaning into your emotions. I do think, though, you need people on your team to help balance the message and to help balance you. But I think it's okay to lean into your emotions.
And is it really important for you to have this great collaboration within your team on your side for a negotiation?
Absolutely. I mean, they make you better, and they're there to support you. I think when you're the attorney that's facing, it's like the negotiator and the controller. Mm-hmm. And the team acts as the controller. And by the way, we all wear different hats. At some points, we're the negotiators. We're the ones that are doing the cross-examination or the direct examination of the witness. We're the one in the spotlight. But the whole team, the control team, is there supporting you and making sure that if you fumble, they'll help you recover quickly.
Right, we have the same understanding, because from our negotiation concept we have those different roles. So we have the negotiator, right, and then we also have the commander, and the commander is responsible to really listen, to do this active listening, and to really watch the negotiator and to support the negotiator if he or she struggles. So this is really the same concept, right?
Exactly.
And how important are diverse perspectives for the preparation within your team?
I think they're key. Mm-hmm. I think you need to have diverse perspectives, because in a negotiation or a trial, you're going to have people look at the same evidence very differently. And you have to understand that they come from different backgrounds, different education levels, they vote differently than you do, and they have their reasons for that. But they're all looking at the same piece of evidence. They're looking at the same problem. But if you don't take into account the way your opponent is looking at that evidence, you're behind. You have to be able to understand what your opponent thinks and empathize with that to be able to get what you want. Because if you can't see it from their perspective, you're missing half the equation.
And if we look at how to lead an actual negotiation, I remember that you used some questioning techniques, right? Can you please give us some more details about that?
I think the questions were really focused on what we needed to elicit from Ms. Heard, for example, any witness, but we knew the information that we needed to get, and we tried many different questions to get that information. So if one form of question didn't work, we would try a different way. And it all led to the same thing, which was, how do we get this particular piece of evidence in? How do I get her to say what I need her to say? And you do that by asking questions. In a cross-examination, similar to a negotiation, I think it matters more what the question is than even sometimes what the answer is. Because through the questions, you're actually telling your story. Mm-hmm. You're telling your side. You're explaining it. And you're educating the public or the jury or the decision maker or the other side as to what it is that you actually are getting at.
Right, and on the opposite side, silence is also really powerful, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that comment?
I think it's an interesting comment, and one that, I wouldn't necessarily call it silence, but I think especially as a woman in this profession, there's this expectation that you have to be very aggressive all the time and assertive. Mm-hmm. And I disagree with that, really, I do. I think that, and what I've told clients in the past is, I may not be the loudest in the room, I may not be the one that storms out of a room, I may not be the most aggressive with my words, but when I do speak, people listen. And that you accomplish by being analytical and really observing before you talk. Because your words mean something, because you've chosen them quite significantly and carefully. And so that's my style of negotiation. That's my style of advocacy. That's not everyone's. Some people are better at being uber aggressive, but that's genuine to them. What's genuine to me is I sit back, I observe, I analyze, and then when I speak, I know I have people's attention.
So other strategies and tactics you use in negotiations that you might want to share?
Oh, goodness.
Where to start?
Yeah, where to start, exactly. I think that something that is not often talked about, but I think is so incredibly important, is to be empathetic to the other side and really take on board what their positions are, even if you vehemently disagree with them. But you have to take them on board because it gives you an advantage in a negotiation in a way that a lot of people don't have. If you can understand what their motivations are, where they're coming from, why they're taking the positions they're taking, you are leaps and bounds ahead of them. I think in negotiations or in high stakes litigation, we're so entrenched in our positions that we forget to look at the evidence from the other side's perspective, or we forget to consider what their motivations are. If you can get to the heart of that, I think that's your path forward to achieving the best result for your side.
So does it always work for you to really understand the opposing side?
I think you have to. You have to see it from their perspective. And I think that what I see in my profession, at least, something that I see routinely is you have really strong advocates. They haven't considered the other side. And then when a jury verdict doesn't go their way, or the judge takes issues an order that goes against you, they're just flabbergasted by it. and they're so surprised. And it's because they really didn't consider what the other side was coming from and why they were advocating for their position. So I think it's incredibly important to be able to disable the other side if you understand what the motivations are.
And when looking at the trial, was there one point when you perceived the counterpart as in a weaker position?
I think there were many moments that I think kind of changed the balance towards our side. I think after Mr. Depp testified and was able to get his story out and tell the world, tell that jury, to him. This was not a script by any means. The way we prepared him was to say to him, these are themes that we're going to address, but we want you to tell the story in your words. We're not here to put words in your mouth. Quite the opposite. And that's how we worked to prepare him for that. So I think that after we got our story out, our position out, I think that was a turning point in the trial. Obviously, after Ms. Heard testified, I don't think that it landed. I don't think it was effective in the way that Mr. Depp's testimony was. And I do think that one of the key turning points in terms of credibility was after the cross-examination of Ms. Heard, where her credibility was really lost.
When was that?
I think it was throughout the cross-examination because there was no accountability on her part. Something Mr. Depp had done quite well was take accountability for behavior or actions that, he wasn't so proud of, or he opened himself up in a way that Ms. Heard just didn't. We had her on tape admitting to being physically abusive towards him, and she denied it. And so I think when you do that, you lose credibility in front of the decision maker.
And when we looked at the trial, so I've observed that Mrs. Heard used her body language in some certain way. What do you think about body language in negotiations?
Oh, I think it's so important. I think it's something you're taught from a very young point in your career as litigators, trial lawyers, is that the jury, the judge, they see everything. And optically, you have to take that into account. So for example, I always had a woman sitting next to Mr. Depp. If it wasn't me, I would place a woman to his left, closest to the jury. And that was very intentional. And the reason I did that, and that was important for the team, is to show the jury, we like this person, we believe in him, and we're not afraid of him. And that was true. We were not. And we wanted to show that to the jury. That was incredibly important for us, to always have a woman sitting next to him saying, I believe him. I'm sitting here, I'm not afraid of this person. I believe him, and what he's telling you the truth. So optics are incredibly important. The way you dress is incredibly important, I believe. Colors mean things. I think body language, obviously, incredibly important in negotiation. I think juries and the other side can pick up if you truly believe in what you're saying.
So finally, the jury ruled for Mr. Johnny Depp, right? So was there anything surprising for you in the end?
I think I was just more relieved. I was just more relieved that we accomplished what we set out to do, and that we were able to give him his name, his good name back, and he deserved that peace. He deserved that more than anyone I know. He deserves peace and happiness, and for his career and life to continue after this, and to close that chapter.
Right.
It was about closing that chapter and truly being able to say definitively, a jury of your peers unanimously said, no, Mr. Depp, you did not do this, and we believe you. And that was a gift, I think, that we were able to give him. So no, I didn't have any surprises per se. I think that the jury was quite thoughtful in their deliberations. And I think when I speak, I, for one, am very grateful to them. And I know Mr. Depp is as well.
Were there any learnings for you personally?
Oh, tons. Yeah, I learned a tremendous amount. And that's what I love about my job, and being able to speak with people like you and other people that are partaking in this conference is I learn from other people's styles and from mistakes that you make along the way, because all of us make mistakes. So I learned a tremendous amount from this trial, and there were things that, of course, I would have done differently or done exactly the same. But you only learn that by actually doing your craft, by engaging negotiations, by talking to other people that do what you do. I say it often, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right. Thank you so much, Camille, for the great insights.
Thank you so much.
You're such a strong and powerful woman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.